Welcome again. It's Donald Davidoff, co-founder and CEO of Real Estate Business Analytics, here for another episode of The People Behind the Performance, where I sit down with key leaders and disruptors in our industry to dive into what's really driving the real estate industry's success, the role data plays in it, and more importantly, tell the stories of some of the people behind it. Today's guest is Daniel Cunningham, founder and CEO of Leonardo 24/7. Daniel is a technologist, author, and recognized thought leader in the field of real estate management. In 2014, Cunningham launched the SaaS company Leonardo 24/7 to help real estate operators ensure on-site teams are complying with corporate standards and procedures. Cunningham is also the author of 365 Days of Property Management, and prior to founding Leonardo 24/7, he served as director of asset management for Aimco, co-founded a sustainable home builder, Living Homes, and started his own property management company in Los Angeles. Daniel's got a civil engineering degree from the University of Arizona. Engineering degrees are near and dear to my heart. As I think you know, Daniel, I got a aeronautical engineering degree. So welcome to the podcast. We'll jump right in.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate you being able to have me on the show. I love it. I've read a bunch of the other interviews. So you're getting some good information out of folks.
Excellent. Well, okay, I got to start though. Before we start, I've got to ask: does anybody ever call your company Leonardo 247, not getting the 24/7?
Yeah. Yes, all the time. I mean, it's okay. It's one of those things you don't think about when you're picking the brand. We tend to actually just refer to as Leo a lot.
Okay.
So
yeah,
feel free to do that too.
I like the personalization, right? I mean, real estate business analytics, we call it Reba. So maybe Reba and Leo can get together sometime.
Yeah, same thing. I like that. The idea was when people ask why Leo or Leonardo, it's like, well, we wanted you to think about the company as like, a partner, like you're another part of your organization. I ask Steve Leo, what does Leo have to say about, what we're doing today? Yes, I'm on the same page.
No, I think that works really well. Okay, so we'll get a little bit more serious now. I always ask this question at the start. It's a great way to kick things off. As you think about the state of the industry today, what's on your mind? What are you excited about? What kind of keeps you up at night?
Well, we were just at OpTech a few weeks ago, and I think without question, the number one topic of discussion and the number one thing that's changing in this industry that's going to have a massive impact, in my opinion, is the role of centralization. We have inherited that. I think the idea has been percolating in the back of people's minds for a while. I think, take the example like Cattler with Anyone Home, like that idea that you could centralize leasing, or at least some portion of the leasing, like setting appointments, that sort of thing. That was kind of the very first foray into this. But what the Great Resignation has forced us to acknowledge is that people are leaving this industry because now they have a viable option, that they can work from home, they can make as much money, maybe more. They don't have to risk getting insulted by residents and dealing with like the psychological damage that sometimes is done by being on site. And so we're going to experience a dearth of qualified people to come in our industry, and both on the property operation side and the maintenance side. And so doing more with less is we're going to have to wrestle with that, and centralization is how that's going to be done. So, people are talking about, as you heard, people are talking about, can we create pods of maintenance supervisors that we will no longer have them based on site. We will send them out on demand when they're needed. Can we force residents to do their own maintenance? I was sitting in a meeting just a few days ago with somebody who controls a lot of units that's convinced that they're moving to a model where they're going to ask residents to do their own maintenance. Don't agree with that, but it's a subject that's on the table. Certainly virtual leasing has come into its own. Definitely not mature in terms of the technology and the process that's being used, but even if it's in its infancy, has proven its efficacy. I remember when I was running a management company, Don, we used to say, people don't lease. They're not leasing the building. They're not leasing the company. They're leasing you. You're the leasing agent. That's how and now we're having people that are leasing without ever meeting anybody, right? So we know that's not true.
Yeah.
So I think centralization is going to change our business in a meaningful way. Not today and not tomorrow, but I would imagine in 2 years.
Mhm.
you're going to now you will find apartment buildings where maybe you live there and you never see anybody that works for the
Yeah.
management company. I think that's possible.
No, it is very interesting, and that's certainly, there's certainly a wealth of different organizations doing it, experimenting with it, et cetera. In fact, we find at REBA the centralization of data, the notion of the single source of truth is actually supporting that, because people they're not wanting to rely on the phone call to find out what's going on site. They want to see it all, and as you said, there may not be as many people on site in the future. So that's a really fascinating trend.
I think the idea behind Reba, and I think the again the notion of business intelligence, which
Mhm.
had people had taken stabs at it in the past, and people have done some homespun solutions that were moderately successful and sometimes not at all. I think that idea has definitely now taken root and is being strengthened by this idea of centralization, that we want to be able, if we're not going to be on site all the time, we need to have some visibility into the metrics that matter. And I think what you guys are doing fits very nicely into that. I would argue Leo is the other half of that. Like,
right. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Tell people a little bit before we get into your personal background. I mentioned briefly, but tell people a little more about exactly what Leo does.
Yeah, so we call Leo an operations and maintenance platform because we really don't have a better name for it. We've tried.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a great descriptor, honestly, because what we think about is Leo is really the other must-have operating platform. You have obviously the PMS systems that have been
Mm-hmm.
around for a long time that are built on an accounting platform, and everything they do comes from this bias that they have towards that they're the single source of resident data. So everything that's been built on top of those platforms is generally resident facing, like leasing and lease tracking and the marketing and the resident portals. All that stuff naturally grows when you have resident data. And so for a long time, what was actually happening at the site level was really an ad hoc process. It was whatever people kind of knew what they or thought they should be doing at the site level. The insights that came from my experience at Aimco, and then later running a management company here in Los Angeles, was that we were expecting these folks on site to be experts in everything, to know it all, remember it all, and that was not reasonable. And as a result, we were seeing massive gaps on the operations that sometimes were very costly. And we had tried to sort of spackle around that by training people, and but a business has over 50% turnover rate, which is now worse than ever. So even if you have people that are trained in 18 months, they're gone, they're out the door. So how can you provide consistency and accountability at this, especially if you've got a number of properties and a larger portfolio? How do you do that? And that was really where Leo comes into play. So what clients use Leo for is they systematize, they automate all of their policies and procedures, their best practices, inspections, workflows, anything that needs to encourage or dictate a certain kind of behavior at the site level, preventative maintenance. All that stuff is, instead of training people to remember and know all that stuff they're supposed to do, Leo instead becomes the expert in all of that for you, and just gives daily guidance in the form of what comes the workspace that is in our app and our desktop, that gives you guidance, like, here's the thing you need to be doing today, this week.
Yeah, I've always thought of it as sort of bringing to life that shelf of binders that everybody had back in the 90s and the aughts, but whoever opened the binder and actually followed it, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And so bringing that binder to life and measuring that people are actually executing against it, capturing the data that we never really captured before. And now it's, Leo's expanded from that now. We have a document management system so that contract management happens in Leo. We have a messaging system that helps people talk, and operators talk to each other, not resident facing, but internal. So we're constantly trying to gather more of the site processes together under the Leo umbrella, so that really people have one. You called a single source of truth for data earlier. We want to be like the single source of truth for operation.
No, that makes sense. Excellence. So then let's turn a little bit to the personal side. How did you get involved in the industry?
Like everyone,
it's a flypaper industry. You get caught in it.
Yeah. It's not on purpose. Um, uh, this is, as you mentioned earlier, I've started a couple of other companies in the past. And Leonardo grew out of an experience that I had. We had just launched the home builder, the called Living Homes, which was
Mhm.
a prefab, modern, green, sustainable home builder. But it was right before the market crashed, and so I needed to kind of go back and get a real job. And so I managed to work my way into Aimco, where I was initially an asset manager, and eventually rose to director of asset management, and then ran the fund management side for a little bit. And in that capacity, I was responsible for, checking in with the local community managers, property managers, seeing how the property management team was doing, making sure they were in compliance with our policies and procedures, which oftentimes we found they weren't.
Yeah.
Um, and then, and then eventually, on the fund management side, receiving all of the financials from the properties, reviewing them, reviewing the audits, and then coming back with questions like, why are we inefficient here? Why is occupancy low here? And that was an amazing experience to
Mhm.
understand at a high level the operations behind multifamily apartments. But then I came to work for a developer here in Los Angeles who asked me to start a property management company for them. So then I got really thrown into the trenches, which I had never had that level of experience before. And I was working alongside and directing, the actual community managers and service managers. And that's when I really understood kind of the stress that they live under that eventually led to Leo. So
Yeah.
I ran this property management company for a number of years. And then out of that, you mentioned the book earlier, and I said, hey, actually, something happened. Something happened while I was running the property management company that actually triggered all this. So we had a building in downtown Los Angeles, 12-story high rise that lost hot water one day, and what happened? I tell this story sometimes as the origin story of Leo, is the boiler literally melted down, and the reason it melted down was somebody hadn't checked the inside ceramics for cracks, and so
Mhm.
fire was going through. So we lost hot water, the whole building. We had to have a boiler expedited, fabricated, helicopter to the roof, cost tons of money. We gave all these people rent credits, and the
Mhm.
the owner of the company was furious initially at me, like, how did you let this happen, Daniel? And I said, well, I don't know anything about managing a boiler, and our community managers didn't know anything about it. Like, we expect the vendors to know this thing. And he's like, you need to make sure this never happens at any property ever again. So I started developing this process of, okay, well, here's the things I need. Okay, I need to make sure we check the boilers once a quarter, but maybe there's more. Like, maybe there's something I have to do every day or every week or every month. And that led to my own kind of cheat sheet, a binder of like, okay,
Yeah.
here's everything we need to be. And I go, well, nobody's going to read this. So I wrote a book, which you mentioned,
Right.
and called 365 Days of Property Management. And I said, aha, okay, this is my ticket to the good life. I'm going to
Right.
start a property management company based on the tenets in this book, a better
Mhm.
mousetrap way to manage, and the
Yeah.
world will be the path to my door. So I bought the management company. Um, and then started it out on my own. And then I quickly realized the book was really not much that much better than the binders you were talking about.
Mhm.
And that's when I realized, hey, I should create a piece of software from this, turn this into software. And I had a management company. I could eat my own dog food, see
Right.
if it worked, see if my thesis was right. And that was how sort of things got started. And then I launched the software company shortly after that.
Yeah. No, that's a spectacular origin story. I love it. When you look back on the career you've had already, like who was your most influential professional mentor or two? Like who did you learn the most from?
Um, well, there were a lot of smart people at Aimco.
Mhm.
Um, um, and uh, and David Robertson, who was the president of the asset management group,
Mhm.
um, expected a lot of us as asset managers, and we would go through an asset review on a monthly basis. And remember, each asset manager had about 50 properties. It was a ridiculous number of properties.
Mhm.
One cannot really asset manage 50 properties. Nonetheless, it was what it was. We each had about 50 properties, and David's expectation was that we would understand each asset intimately, such that we could go into a meeting, once a quarter, um, give them a rundown of the financials, the local market conditions, the capital needs of the project, explain variances in the financials. And if you didn't have all of that on hand, you were embarrassed, let's say.
Mhm.
And so I became an expert in apartment operations and financials through that process because it required me to
Mhm.
delve into every single property's operations on a regular basis. And I learned so much through that. And I really transformed from
Mhm.
somebody who didn't understand, frankly, anything about the financial aspect of the business, or the operational piece for sure, to probably their this is not really ego speaking, but probably their best
Mhm.
um, asset manager analysts, like
Mhm.
understanding financials at a
Yeah.
glance. So that really that molded a lot
Mhm.
of my experience in the business, and and I think probably got me interested in, well, what more can we do to do better? Because I was seeing all of the problems. We were
Right.
talking about, all of the inefficiencies in running these businesses and how they're
Mhm.
impacting our financials.
Mhm.
And that lit the fire of, well, maybe there's a better way that we can improve and become more efficient.
Yeah. So that's actually that's a great segue into one of my favorite questions I always ask. What do you think 2022 Daniel Cunningham knows that the Daniel Cunningham back then didn't know, that you wish you could go back and teach him? Right? Something you've learned through the process that you know today, you wish you had known way back when.
Um, well, what's really clear to me now is the extent to which um, a single individual can impact the performance of a multi-million dollar asset. You have you have you have people that are making, $20, $25 an hour sometimes at most.
Mhm.
Highest paid property managers are making like $100,000 a year, maybe,
Yeah.
and they can be running a $100 million P&L,
Mhm.
and and one quarter of mismanagement can ruin your P&L for a year or 2 years or worse,
Mhm.
depending on what happens. I have seen assets uh, that caught fire because they weren't maintained properly, because the sprinkler systems weren't inspected in a timely fashion, and
Mhm.
I've seen insurance companies deny that claim, and I've seen that take down an entire company
Yeah.
because because the asset is a loss, and then because that asset is a loss, the company can't
Yeah.
pay out the investors, and there's lawsuits, and it takes. So the extent to which the performance of one person can impact $100 million asset was
Mhm.
not clear to me when I was at Aimco. We were still thinking about um, what's happening in the market.
Right.
What's market occupancy? What's market vacancy? What does market rents look like?
Mhm.
What can we if we put in stainless steel, can we get $50 more per month in rent? And all of that great thought and intention can be undermined by a bad local team.
Yeah. No,
And
that
I
that
think,
that's really insightful. I know. I mean, sort of a flip side of that. When I ran pricing revenue management at Archstone, one of the things I always emphasized to the team was, look, we're a force multiplier. We're not the ones actually making the money. It's the field that's making the money. So if they're making zero, it doesn't matter what the force multiplier is, right? And so that emphasis on that team in the field is really where the money is made, no matter how smart the central executives are and central middle management. I think that's a really, really insightful point.
yeah, you're absolutely right. And so whatever you can do to empower the local teams
Yeah.
to have as much knowledge as possible, and much training and technology and information as possible to do that job
Yeah.
as best they can, is the number one thing you can do to improve your pro forma.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. So before we talk a little bit about data, always near and dear to my heart, one more question on your personal background. You do a podcast series yourself, so tell the group listening here a little bit about your podcast, Apartment Academy. Why you're doing it, and what you're trying to accomplish with that.
Oh, well, thank you, Don. Appreciate that.
It's a
Um,
softball, but why not? We're friends.
well, there are plenty of Okay, cool. Professional courtesy. Thank you. Um,
Yeah.
there are so many real estate related podcasts out there that are like, hey, how do I turn $5 into $5 million and
Hmm.
buy with no money down, and it's not that. I think there's plenty of interesting, compelling podcasts that talk about the investment side. We really wanted to address the operators.
Hmm.
What could we deliver that could serve as practical information for people that are on the ground every day, or people that were owners who wanted to improve operations. There wasn't anything that was really keenly laser focused on the operation side. And so everybody that we bring on, what I'm trying to tease out of them is, what do you do that's maybe better, you think better than the next person if you're an operator? Like, what's the magic behind your
Hmm.
company? What makes you successful? Or we bring vendors in the industry on to talk about and explain, like, why is renter insurance important, and there's a
Hmm.
lot of different flavors. How do people make the decision? So that's it. And there's even a couple episodes where I talk about how to interpret financials, building on my IMCO background. So
Right.
that's our goal, is to deliver a real operational
Yeah.
insights.
No, that's really cool. So we sort of talked around data and the importance of data, but I'd love to hear in your words, what does data-driven decision making mean to you, and how are you helping to make that happen?
So from our perspective, because we're operational focused,
Hmm.
um, if we go back to what I was just saying, actually, about how a bad a manager whose eye is not on the ball can really affect you negatively,
Hmm.
is kind of one of the data points. How do you measure whether or not the folks on site are doing everything they should be doing? We really, before Leo, there wasn't really a way to sort of keep an eye on that. And so what the industry had done was create this layer of regional property managers whose job was to
Yeah.
go out and say, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And text them and email them and call them. And that was super inefficient, but it was necessary, because otherwise, how would you know that somebody hadn't done their fire inspection, right? Um, and all the training that we give them, as we was talking about earlier, you can train people on that stuff, but with all the turnover, that's not always really super effective. So for us, the data that we're looking to look at is, first of all, what are your critical operational tasks, procedures, inspections,
Hmm.
and are those being done? Are they being done in a timely fashion? And then what is the data you're collecting in those? Like, for example, the daily pool pH monitoring that's done, sometimes twice daily, sometimes thrice daily in some places. Um, uh, if you want to know if somebody's out there measuring the pH every day, and the pH is above, I don't know what's critical, like 8.0 or something like that, on
Hmm.
the if you have a pH above that, and there's a risk of a chemical burn, um, that's data that we can produce. Like, hey, here's all of the pools in your portfolio that were out of range. Here's the chemicals that were added, or here's what steps they
Yeah.
took. Do you agree with that? Um, Water intrusion issues. So if there's a water leak, we don't say mold anymore. We say, I think, something growth, moisture growth or something. Anyway, so
Whatever the euphemism is.
yeah, whatever it is. So if you want to avoid the appearance of moisture growth, there's a process you want them to follow, right? Did they get an all clear letter before somebody moved in?
Hmm.
Did they, what did they spend on the remediation? Did they get a certified contractor to do that work? So there's a workflow that gets launched within Leo. If you
Hmm.
have a moisture, if you have a water leak or something like that, and you launch the workflow, you can see real time, like, what's the data look like? Okay, so all of our water leaks were all managed by people that were licensed, and we had all clear letters over 90% of them. This 10%, here's the additional information that we took. So and then there's maintenance data.
Hmm.
So boiler, backflow preventers that have to be in some certain range. All that should be performed in Leo so that it's tracked. You know when it's happening, and if anything's out of range,
Hmm.
we want to surface that data. So
Yeah.
anything that really, I guess when we say it, Don, is anything that puts the property at risk.
Yeah.
That kind of data can be
So
surfaced through Leo.
yeah. So where do you see the future of data going? Right. I mean, there's so many different ideas out there. I'm curious how you see data in this industry evolving.
Um, so I'm again from our bias on the operational side, because I really like the I really like the Reba side. Like I like there's financial data that needs to trigger behavior, but I think on the operational side, what the next level is using data to automatically then trigger something else.
Yeah.
Right now it's like it's on a dashboard, you can see it. You're like, okay, that's bad. I want to do something else. What we want to then is to complete that virtuous cycle and use the data to automatically dispatch the moisture remediation contractor, or automatically summon some other vendor, or escalate something to a risk manager within the company, or a regional property manager, something like that, saying like, hey, here's something you need to know about and that you need to do something about, and here's the right tool you need to do that. And then using also the performance data to help better evaluate who needs more training in the organization, who's in the wrong role, who needs to be moved out, who's a superstar.
Yeah, I like what you're describing there, because I think in the data science world, that's what's referred to as augmented intelligence, right? It's not artificial intelligence that's doing doing tons and tons of analysis. Frankly, I don't know that we have enough data to really feed machine learning, but to be able to take some of the human decision making out by creating triggers and alerts and things like you talked about. To me, that's a really interesting potential, not only to reduce the error rate, but it kind of ties to what you were saying at the beginning of our conversation around, how much harder it is to find enough talent. So if we can reduce the number of people we need, ultimately the ones who are there can focus on the real value added and let the computer take care of the simple stuff.
Yeah, here's some breaking news that I'll share with you that's not public yet, but will be probably by the time this is aired. So one way we're using data is we have correlated loss data, insurance loss data, with behavior data. So Leo gets to see the things that are being done to mitigate risk, and we're correlating that with the history of loss at these properties so that we can see what behaviors lower your chance of being hit with an insurance claim of whatever type. And we're synthesizing that data into something called the live risk indicator, which is, or for short, the LRI. And the LRI will be a FICO score that gives some sense of at a property and even a building level, what kind of risk that property represents in the property casualty world as a potential claim based on their behavior. Right now, that's all based on physical characteristics. If you have an old building versus new building, we're able to now look at behavior, and that LRI score will be able to secure better insurance rates for our clients.
That's powerful. I mean, what a way to take computer technology and then turn it into something that an asset manager is going to really care about, because it affects his bottom line. Excellent. Well, now that we've done the heavy lifting, we always like to end these half-hour sessions with a fun little rapid fire. I like to call it James Lipton style, if you remember the old Inside the Actor Studio thing.
Actor Studio guy, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So not his questions, but we've got our own set of 7 questions we're going to ask. The only rule is don't think too hard, okay? So here we go, right. Rapid fire. Number 1, what book has influenced you the most?
Traction by Gino Wickman.
Sweet.
We run our whole business on the EOS Entrepreneurs Operating System. I cannot recommend it enough for anybody who's building a company.
Excellent. What's your favorite time of day?
2 in the morning.
2 in the morning. Okay.
I'm not a morning person. My day is completely filled with people that I need to, my team that needs me to help them. I don't get any work done during the day. Then it's family time with dinner, whatever. And so I really am most productive between midnight and 2 in the morning.
2 a.m. No, I love it. I love it. What's your favorite app?
My favorite app. I don't want to think too hard here. My favorite app is TikTok. I love
Cool.
TikTok, and I get my Ukrainian war information off of TikTok. I get election information off of TikTok. Once in a while, because I live in LA, the algorithm feels like I need to know how to do a face peel. Okay, I accept this, but I think TikTok is changing the way that people are receiving information. And for me, since they're 1.5 minute videos, and I have a short attention span, it works perfect for me.
Yeah,
I love it. I think it's
they're
hilarious.
perfect. What's your pet peeve?
Dishonesty. We always say in our company, we're humans. Everyone is going to make mistakes, and nobody's going to be punished for making a mistake. But if you don't admit to it, or you blame it on somebody else, or hide it, then you can never be trusted ever again. So that's my biggest pet peeve.
No, that's a great leadership perspective as well. Last 3 questions. This one I always warn comes from a marketing person. Not my question, but I love it anyway. What's your spirit animal?
I guess going along with my late night proclivity, it would have to be like an owl, I guess.
An owl.
Right?
I like that one. Yes.
The
wisdom as well. It could have been a raccoon.
Just kind of thinking through things.
Yep. All good. An owl.
Trash panda.
If you had to pick one food to eat forever, what would you eat?
I would eat chocolate ganache cake. It's my favorite thing.
Excellent. And lastly, what's your go-to for a good laugh?
Dave Chappelle. He's the most brilliant comedian of our time.
Yeah. So thanks again, Daniel, for joining us, sharing your insights. Just one last time, where can people learn about you and Leonardo 24/7 online?
Yeah, the website's www.leonardo247. I'll say it that way. .com. Also, the Apartment Academy is apartmentacademy.com if anybody's interested in coming on and sharing some operational wisdom with our listeners. That's where you go for that.
Yeah, please reach out to Daniel for that. Well, thanks again, Daniel. This is fun doing this.
Thanks, Don. Good to see you.